Hello and welcome to AstroFic, your weekly dose of fun, relatable astrology content where we apply astrology to fictional characters to find out why they're like that. But first, let me explain how this works and who I am. Hey, I'm Celeste, and I've been studying astrology off and on for about 5 years now, but it's always been present in my life. Within the past couple of years, I began practicing the art of reading birth charts, and this podcast is just another tool for me to apply and familiarize myself with all that I've learned. However, this podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only. I will be explaining the astrology as I go, but I'll be explaining it as I understand it, and I am by no means an expert. Making this podcast is fun for me because I get to ramble about my favorite characters and astrology combined. And while I hope you learn something, you very well may not. Either way, the more you know about astrology, the more you'll enjoy this podcast. So I do encourage all my listeners to passively take in as much knowledge as they can. For this podcast, I will be using the whole sign house system because it is just a much more basic outline of the house system and fits better with the format of a podcast where I can't show you the physical birth chart. When it comes to what birth date I use for characters, I will use canon birth dates if they exist to make it more challenging for me to work with the characterization. But before we get started, let's take a little break for our advertisements. This week, we're talking about none other than the infamous donkey from the Shrek series. I feel like since Shrek's introduction into the Library of Congress, I don't need to explain what Shrek is to anyone. But if for some reason you haven't seen Shrek, you should definitely make a whole day of it and just watch all of them, except for maybe Shrek the Third. That's not that great of a movie. But the other three were pretty good, including the fourth one. They just really dropped the ball with the third one. Anyways, enough about the titular character. Let's get into the birth chart of his sidekick, the donkey named Donkey, who marries and has children with a dragon. He is a literal legend. So let's get started with his sun sign. It would be remiss of me to not give Donkey a fire sign. I've debated over and over again exactly which fire sign Donkey's sun should be in, but I ultimately landed on Sagittarius. I know I do assign that a lot, but a very close second was Leo. I just don't like the makeup of the personal planets in the chart for Donkey with a Leo sun. It just didn't fit his characterization. So he's a Sagittarius sun. He's feisty, fiery, fun, loud, and overall a very caring character, which brings me to his next placement. I had to give Donkey a Cancer moon. He is so emotional, caring, and motherly. Sometimes he's more motherly than the actual mothers in this series. And when his feelings are hurt, he makes sure you know it. Unlike what some people may think or say, it's not that water moons are ultra sensitive, it's that they are very in tune with their feelings. So they're just hyper aware of when something has hurt their feelings. It's due to this awareness that makes water moons seem extra sensitive, but that's not necessarily the case. It's just that these people know they've been hurt and therefore want to express that hurt as is their right. It's not that water moons are sensitive, it's that everyone else isn't in touch with their feelings enough for the feelings heavy conversations water moons need to feel better. As a side note, this doesn't apply to just water moons, but it applies to anyone with heavy water placements, and I'd say probably anybody with fourth house placements as well. To round out his big three, I gave Donkey a Gemini rising. I can't have the chatterbox of the franchise on AstroFic and not give him any significant Gemini placements. With a Gemini rising, Donkey is ruled by his Mercury sign, which we'll get into later. But with Gemini in his big three, this makes Donkey mutable sign dominant. Mutable signs kind of rule Donkey's chart, and for good reason. The mutable signs, which are Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces, are the signs of the zodiac most likely to go with the flow and adapt to changing situations. They're not super thrown off when things don't work out exactly as they planned, and they genuinely enjoy supporting those around them make adaptations to whatever changes life throws at them. And Donkey, being a supporting character, makes total sense to me. Since Donkey has a Gemini rising, this means that he also has his first house in Gemini. The first house of the birth chart rules over the self. It has an influence over one's personality, their self image, how they see the world, how they interact with the world, and their presence when they walk into a room. Considering Shrek was irritated with how much Donkey talks within just a few minutes of meeting him, this checks out. Gemini is wonderfully curious and intelligent, always seeking the answers to their questions, but not always the correct answer. Gemini likes to know the why behind everything, including why someone may disagree with their opinion. Gemini is very social and probably thinks they could make friends with anyone if they just talk enough, which isn't entirely wrong and is very much like Donkey because that's exactly what he did with Shrek. I mean, he also stuck his neck out for Shrek multiple times, building up that trust, but a lot of it is just not letting Shrek get a word in edgewise. I did give Donkey one placement in his first house. This may make some of you sad, but the rest of his chart makes up for it, I promise. So I gave Donkey his Chiron in the first house, Gemini. I mean, with how often Donkey gets told to shut up or knock it off or that he's annoying, it only makes sense that his Chiron would be in Gemini. Chiron is the placement that shows a way you've been deeply wounded and a way in which you try to help others from feeling the same pain. Donkey is always told he talks too much, something others with strong Gemini placements may relate to, and so he takes the time to truly listen and connect with others in the hopes that it'll negate the fact that they perceive him as annoying. This doesn't always work, but sometimes it does, and there are always people like Fiona who find Donkey charming and endearing, not really caring how much he talks or just makes noise in general. Sometimes it's even comforting to her. She's another one I have to do an episode on, but for now we're just going to move on to Donkey's second house in Cancer. Donkey has 2 placements in Cancer, one of which is his moon sign, of course. The second house rules over one's financial stability and their values and skills. Donkey is so Cancerian in that sense. He's always making promises to clean and cook breakfast and generally take care of people and the things that they hold dear, like when Donkey house sits while Fiona and Shrek go off on their honeymoon. He's kind of able to make his way through life because of his caring nature for others. Not everyone is as nurturing as Donkey, so people keep him around so they don't have to be the nurturing one. Specifically thinking of Shrek himself, of course. But if he knows this, Donkey doesn't seem to mind. It's just the entrance through which he is capable of worming his way into people's lives, because once you know Donkey, he's just a lovable little scamp who makes waffles in the morning. He truly lives by the fastest way to someone's heart is through their stomach. Donkey's second placement in the Cancer second house is his Pluto. This indicates a tumultuous relationship with the topics of the second house. And it may be the reason why Donkey found himself couch surfing, for lack of a better word. I get it, man. My second house is also in a water sign. It's not the most stable element to have the second house in. You can get kind of delusional with stability and money and values and stuff with a second house water sign. All right, now we're going to skip over to the fourth house, which is in the sign Virgo. The fourth house rules over all things relating to the home you grew up in, how you were raised, your private life, and how you act at home, as well as ruling over the mother. Depending on the chart, you can look at both the moon sign and or the fourth house sign to see how someone was treated by their mother or how they perceive their mother. Donkey only has one placement here, his Neptune. Neptune is the planet of delusion, spirituality, and imagination. It's fantastical and ungrounded from reality, which isn't the greatest for an earth sign like Virgo. This coincides with the fact that Neptune is in detriment in Virgo. When a planet is in detriment, their influence is either misused, negative, or non existent. I think this could indicate that Donkey perceives his childhood differently than how it actually happened. Maybe he was very spacey or dreamy as a child, and that influenced how he remembers his childhood. I think this also makes him believe that his dream lies in domesticity in parenthood. He's a good dad, though, so maybe that's not entirely off the mark. The next house is the fifth house in Libra. The fifth house rules over childlike joy or joy from childhood, as well as creativity, leisure, fortune or luck, pleasure, and self expression. The great thing about this house for Donkey is that his Mars is in this house. Mars is our motivation, our passion and drive and ambition. It propels us forward. For Donkey, his Mars being in the Libra fifth house makes so much sense to me because Donkey loves the things others would disregard as childish. Donkey loves to hang out, lay around, have fun, etc. He seeks the pleasure in life, but that's not to say that he's lazy. He just knows there's the time and place for everything. Sometimes people need him to be fun because his friends are stressed. Other times they need him to nut up or shut up and help them out with this crazy action sequence. But no matter what his friends and chosen family need, he's there for them always. I wrote this episode while I was at work, so I was just like powering through all of the houses. So we're jumping right into the next house, the sixth house in Scorpio. Donkey, once again, only has one placement in this house, and it's a generational planet, so we're probably going to go through this pretty quickly too. Anyways, in the sixth house, Scorpio is Uranus. This isn't the first time I've given a character a Scorpio Uranus, so just really quickly, Uranus is an exaltation in Scorpio. That means that while it's not Uranus's home planet, it is still a compatible sign for the planet to be in. The sixth house rules over daily routines, habits, and physical health. Uranus is the planet of rebellion and change, but in a different way than Pluto. Its change is rapid and typically unforeseen. This placement made sense to me because Donkey's daily routines are always changing. He doesn't actually have a very stable life. He's just learned to live with the instability instead of like trying to go against it. He's just accepted it as a part of his life. And I think that's part of the grace of Uranus and Scorpio for him. Uranus's blessing from being an exaltation is that while it will happen, Donkey can be more adaptable to the changes in his life than others may be. He's very easygoing and flexible. And again, that's that mutable sign dominance that helps him with that. All right, and right into the next house, the seventh house. This is a doozy because he's got not one, not two, but three placements in it. If you know the order of the zodiac wheel, then you may realize that this house is in Sagittarius. Donkey almost has a Sagittarius stellium, which I think is so fun. The seventh house is a house of long-term relationships of any kind. That means romantic, platonic, business, all of that. So let's start with Donkey's sun sign. The sun reads to me as a point of pride and where one can shine in life, or rather how they shine. Donkey, of course, shines the most in his long-term relationships because these are the people who have known him for long enough that they know how Donkey is and it doesn't bother them. He's fun, flirty, and people love him for that. Speaking of love, let's add a planet into the mix. Donkey has his Venus in Sagittarius 7th house. Venus is, as I said, the planet of love. But not just love. Venus also rules over beauty, abundance, and war. Those of you well versed in Greek or Roman myths would know this is because Venus does rule over war in Roman mythos. You can interpret this however you wish, but often people forget this side of Venus, and I like to make a point to make people aware of it every now and again. Not only does Donkey love and adore his friends and such, but he will also go to war for them. I am not even being metaphorical or hyperbolic with that. I literally mean war, because he does go to war for them in the fourth film. Fiona becomes like an ogre warrior princess, and there's a war. It's wild. If you haven't seen the fourth Shrek movie, I actually recommend it. It was much better than the third one. Donkey's love for his friends can be shown in a variety of ways, and I think the biggest way he shows his love is through helping them relieve stress. I mean, his partner's a goddamn dragon. He has to be good at getting people to chill out in order to have procreated with a fucking dragon. A dragon. Also, his relationship with said dragon speaks to Sagittarius Venus. That is like so out there. He's a literal donkey. He is a literal donkey, a literal ass who not only bagged a dragon, but had like 6 donkey dragon hybrid kids with her. That is Sagittarius Venus. Sagittarius Venus is 6 donkey dragon hybrid kids. All right, the last placement in Donkey's Sagittarius 7th house is Mercury, the planet of travel, communication, thinking, and technology. Donkey rarely does anything without having his friends in mind. Sometimes his actions can appear selfish, but when questioned, it's usually coming from a place of genuine love and care. However, Mercury is in detriment in Sagittarius, and as we learned earlier, detriment means that the planet will not function in an efficient or helpful way. I think this manifests partially as Donkey's bad ideas, or the ideas that land him in crazy adventures, or the ideas that he gets other people on board with that ultimately fail spectacularly, like truly, hilariously. Now we're going to skip from the 7th house to the 9th house in Aquarius. The 9th house is one of my personal favorite houses. It rules over higher education, philosophy, worldview, long distance travel, and organized religion. There is only one planet here for Donkey, which is Saturn. Now, lots of people are like really scared of Saturn, but there's really no reason to be. Saturn is the planet that rules over time, discipline, and restriction. That can sound scary, sure, but as all parts of astrology do, Saturn represents a vital part of the human experience. We must have discipline and know when to exercise restrictions. We just don't like it. So people see Saturn's lessons as harsh instead of enlightening because they just want to do whatever the fuck they want. But that's okay because the girls that get it, and the girls that don't. Anyways, Donkey has Saturn in the ninth house Aquarius, which is epic because Saturn is in domicile in Aquarius, which means that Aquarius rules Saturn. The effects of Saturn have a positive impact because of it being in a sign of its rulership. In the ninth house, Saturn exerts its abilities over the topics of the ninth house, which I think explains why Donkey can't read, maybe. I think it can be interpreted that Donkey will sometimes ignore his own morality and world values because the people around him don't support it. Eventually, he does have what I like to call a Steve Harrington moment where he realizes he shouldn't let anyone in his life dictate his views except for him. It's kind of the thing where you don't change how you live your life because of how someone around you feels. You only do it because you want to. Okay, we have 2 more houses to go, so let's keep it moving to the 10th house in Pisces. This house has his last planetary placement, which is Jupiter. This is a wonderful placement because Jupiter is in domicile in Pisces. This means that Jupiter is pretty influential and uplifting in Donkey's life. The 10th house rules over one's public perception, as in how the public perceives them. I always describe Pisces as wishy-washy, and I think that can definitely be seen here because people either love Donkey or they hate him, and they can flip-flop their opinions pretty quickly, honestly. I mean, typically it flips from hate to love, which is Jupiter's influence. The 10th house also rules over social status and one's role in the world. With Pisces in the 10th house, it's kind of giving that scene from Shark Tale where the car wash boss is telling Oscar where he's at in the food chain, but only because Pisces is the last sign in the zodiac, which is honestly a pretty weak reason, but that's where my mind goes. Anyways, we do see that Donkey's role in the Fantasy Critter Society is pretty insignificant until he starts helping out Shrek. The fantasy critters, the pigs, blind mice, Pinocchio, wolf, etc., all listen to Donkey's leadership after the first movie. He goes from insignificant to a community leader in one movie. Very Pisces Jupiter to me. All right, everyone, we are now into the last house of Donkey's birth chart with any placements in it. We're going to be talking about the 11th house in Aries. Donkey has 2 placements here, but they're both placements having to do with the moon. So first up is Donkey's Lilith in Aries' 11th house. Lilith is considered the darkest point in the sky at the moment you're born and therefore represents some of your quote-unquote shadow side traits. I'm not well versed in Lilith or her effects on a natal chart, so please correct me if I'm wrong. That's a thing I can say now because there are 15 different countries listening to AstroFic. Anywho, I think having a Lilith in Aries can make one more impulsive than would be normal. As we see in the movies, Donkey does tend to act on impulses without entirely thinking it through. And even if he tells other people his plans and the other people are like, hey, this is a bad plan, he doesn't listen to them and he just does it anyways. That kind of reads as Lilith in Aries to me. Okay, last placement. I gave Donkey a North Node in Aries' 11th house. His destiny lies in him aggressively making friendships and creating community for those friends. The North Node is essentially supposed to be like the North Star of our birth charts. It's where we are moving toward consciously or not. For Donkey, his is leading him towards being like a leader for people and for his community, which he is. I just talked about it, but with the magical or storybook characters looking to Donkey for plans and advice and help when Shrek and Fiona are captured and missing and all of that. So yeah, maybe Donkey's Chiron is in a rough place at the start, but his chart overall is very uplifting and positive. So that is my fan-made natal chart for Donkey from Shrek. Please leave a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you enjoyed this episode, and don't forget to share it with friends and fan groups. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. And if you have an idea of who I should do on the podcast next, go ahead and leave that in your rating or review. And check out my link tree for my socials if you want to talk about the episodes. My name is Celeste, and you've been listening to AstroFic. Tune in next time to find out why our favorite characters are like that. Bye!